Francis of Assisi was one of the most remarkable characters in history. He revolutionized the 13th century church by living the words of Christ. Francis was born in 1182 in the small hill city of Assisi in the province of Umbria. His father was Pietro di Bernardone, a wealthy cloth merchant. His mother came from a noble French family. Legend says that before his birth, either because of her own humility or through some premonition of his future greatness, she asked to be taken to the stable of their house. This must have brought consternation to the Governante, her housekeeper.
Dear Lord, women are unpredictable enough at feasts and funerals, but on these occasions, childbirths, then we excel ourselves. Then no demand is too excessive. Hankering for snow in June or strawberries at Christmas, believing that our dearest friend conspires to poison us, the absurdest thought becomes an article of faith, and we, its martyrs. Why, if I swore the moon was green and you denied it, I would know the deep corruption of the world had tainted you. Our breeding time breeds more perversities than maggots in a dead dog. We accept them like storms or providential acts. But this new whim of Our Lady, by Our Lady, I never knew its equal. She waits until the master is abroad, and then refuses to have his child loosed in the very bed where it began. Declares the panelling was carved expressly to annoy her, the brocade hung to disturb her dreams. She will not stay there, nor in the house. The other rooms offend for 20 other reasons, none with reason. No, she demands, and nothing less will do, the stable. Truly, I repeat, the stable. As any normal woman might grow peevish for Spanish figs, for scents from Gascony, or lace that only Bruges can satisfy, she craves for dung straw and the smell of horses. We'll have to humour her. We can't afford miscarriages or monsters. We must clean it as well as she'll allow. Perhaps a tapestry to hide the barest wall. Candles will help. But that Our Lady, this good Christian woman, should carve in a stable. Oh, the poor master.
The stable still exists in a narrow passageway near the piazza. The small square room is now the chapel of the infant Francis. The plainness of the original building has been left unchanged, so it is possible to imagine a scene reminiscent of the first nativity.
The ass said, I remember. It has all happened before. This girl, the shaded lantern, the crib on the dark floor, this haze smelling of summer, that lurching sack of corn, where among moving shadows a little god was born. Said the ox, that far December, 3 mighty emperors came, 2 with crowns of emerald, 1 with a cloak of flame. They brought their gifts by starlight, knelt by that tiny one, to the music of hooves and bridles, rode to the rising sun. Then ass and ox together. No kings have come tonight. Not even humble shepherds kneel in the dancing light. This is no god who lies here to work some holy plan. Only a saint, a little saint, poised between God and man.
When When Francis was old enough, his father took him to the church of San Giorgio, where the canons of the cathedral ran a school for merchants' sons. We don't know how good a scholar he was, but it's clear from his life and writings that he was not the idiota or completely unlettered person he called himself. The canons would have seen to that.
Indeed, a good sound education, appropriate to a lad of the merchant class. Thorough, yet in moderation, lest in a boy of his status it make him precocious and presumptuous. Religion, of course, doctrine, theology, enough to guard him from gross error, though insufficient to encourage argument, quibbling, or analytical debate. We disapprove of young men who grow disputatious and contentious. Moreover, training in concentration. During this discussion, his dragonfly attention has been diverted by that tapestry. His ears have disengaged from my words to wander after French minstrels in the piazza. His mind lacks discipline. His face is vulnerable, a target for levity and sensuality. We shall see, we shall see. Let him come tomorrow. Yes, at 8 o'clock to start his schooling. I think we may impart some learning beside the measure of respect that's due to church and parents. Of course. If caught when young, no child is unredeemable, though in some, I confess, the process may be less, shall we say, less instantaneous.
Francis probably received even more of his education from the city square, which was the meeting place for people of every kind. Shopkeepers, farmers' wives bringing in their produce from the country, priests, apprentices, children playing around the fountain, and muleteers waiting to carry their masters' goods to trade in France and other countries. As the boy grew up, he must often have accompanied his father on these journeys.
Aye, a spare lad he were in them days, naught but a sapling. Yet no weakling, mind you, winds could bend, not break him. The master's venture over the Alps that winter, that were no child's play, I can swear. I handled the pack mules. Roads were rough then, half-built, tricky with sliding stones and ice in the hollows. But coming down into France, the sun met us, sunlight and spring floods. Where bridges were broke, we forded streams with water lapping our saddlebags. We worked harder keeping them bales dry than save our skins from drowning. Then the rain stopped, and spring was left. At first, we rested our mules in clean pastures under the mountains, then kept to bridle paths, or made across open country, fearing robbers that lurked in them dark woods. At last we dropped into Avignon, praise St. Christopher. We sold our goods at the local cloth fairs, or bartered them for the best wool brought from Cotswold. That lad were pleased as a puppy with 2 tails. He loved the great flat cornfields in them parts, the little churches. He loved the people, too. Talked like a Frenchy and sang like one. Riding for home, he warbled sweet as a lark. No troubadour sang better. Aye, he were merry then, the same as us. That's how I think of him. Not as a friar who turned his father sour. Nay, that lad on muleback, singing without a care.
At home, Francis entered into the life of the city. Even for a merchant's son, his clothes were sumptuous beyond measure. He loved singing and dancing and became leader of the wealthy young people of Assisi. Francis spent so extravagantly that his father complained, not without a touch of pride. "He is more like a young prince than our son." But his mother had other views. "One day," she'd say quite firmly, "he will be chosen by God." It seemed most unlikely in the year 1200.
When in the evening shadows fall, and friend and neighbour, seizing lute and tabor, race to the meadows beyond the wall, then comes Francis to lead the dances, lightest and swiftest, gayest of them all. The dancing dying at end of day, back to the city with such a lilting ditty of love and of legend they chant and sway, that the streets are ringing to endless singing as young and careless they pass this way. Then to the banquet they bring their song. With many a crony laughs Prince Bernardone, the king of folly who rules this throng, feasting and drinking, bright unwinking, by torchlight and candle the wild night long, until in the morning, when dark is done, when the torches smoking sets an end to their joking, when guests are leaving one by one and voices cease, he surrenders Assisi to the dazzling, towering, exultant sun. But sometimes when the gold sun lifts behind Sebacio, or westward at evening falls through a fire of cloud, till gardens glow in its warmth, and the tiered walls are form and colour only, he abruptly turns from his friends, as though a hand were laid on his shoulder, and a voice as real as theirs, but more insistent, said, "Come, Francis, come," calling him on some mission, urgent but inexplicable. He wanders alone through moonlight streets, as a shadow among shadows, or in early dawn escapes the city into fields and olive groves that shine with dew. Here violets grow from the tangled vine roots, clusters of blue grape hyacinths rise by his path, and curving swallows cry, "See, see, see, Assisi," in their swift, headlong flight. He is absorbed in the morning. He becomes part of earth and the movement of earth. The olive stems climb through him. Young tendrils entwine his heart. He is one with the swallows in their wild swooping, one with the dew pearl poised on the hyacinth globe, one also with the sun that takes it. The breeze of morning is the pulse of his own breathing. All these, earth and sky, and the creatures of earth and sky, all are the writings of God. Their life is his. His seal is stamped upon all.
2 years later, when he was 21, Assisi's continual quarrel with the rival city of Perugia came to a head. A small band of soldiers, including Francis, was sent to meet the Perugians. Francis was taken prisoner and kept in jail for a year. When released, possibly through illness, he had lost his love both of city life and of the beauty of the countryside. His gaiety, too, seemed to have left him.
That sun of Umbria, that cobalt sky where whistling swallows in their hundreds fly, no longer touch the heart they touched before. What once delighted me delights no more. Those trees that laced the sky when boughs were bare now lift white branches to the blossoming air. I see their beauty, but can time restore what once delighted me and comes no more? Then in the springtime lanes I would rejoice to hear the mingled notes of viol with voice, these laddering skylarks where they sing and soar. What once delighted me delights no more. Not even woman now can move my heart, for all those thousand charms of artless art that blood can answer and the mind adore. What once delighted me delights no more. The earth is dead to me, or I am dead. Nothing contents the eye, now joy has fled. Though all past memories of my life implore, love has deserted me. She comes no more.
He tried to recover by taking part in his old pursuits.
Oh, love is like a lute song of rapture and despair, tender, poignant, beautiful, it fades along the air.
He used to walk about the city at night with the other young men and women, laughing and singing.
Oh, love is like a garden where many a fragrant flower, budding, breaking, blossoming, must breathe in the air.
Continuing the lute song as they walked, he slowly dropped behind.
Oh, love is like a springtime, a season of green leaves, swiftly, sadly, silently, the autumn heart breathes.
His friends joked, "What's the matter, Francis? Are you in love? What's the lady's name?" Francis answered seriously, "Her name is Poverty, Lady Poverty." For suddenly he had realized that poverty was an essential part of his spiritual progress. And from then on, Lady Poverty became his mistress.
My Lady Poverty, save for our Lord, Saviour of all the world, none claims my sword but you alone. You only do I serve, you and God's word, till life has flown. Clothed in humility, your lowly dress holds the whole quality of loveliness. No other queen in all the courts of love can so impress, stand so serene. Your palace of delight, though built of clay, comforts my heart and mind, both night and day. For simplest things that dwell within its walls are fair and gay and fit for kings. O Lady Poverty, walk at my side throughout my lease of time, and be my bride when you abide. so wide is riches I.
Now Francis chose to be alone. He would take a horse and ride by himself in the surrounding countryside. One day, he encountered a leper on the road, and this incident was to change his whole life. First, let a passing merchant describe what happened, and then the leper himself.
In my opinion, nauseating and disgusting. Not that I'm squeamish, as you know, but this... Now, you shall judge. I saw young Francis returning from Foligno dressed like a lord, superbly mounted on his father's most expensive gelding, but sunk too deep in dreams of poverty to hear my horse approaching. Where? I'll tell you. You know the crossroads of San Salvatore della Perette, where you catch the first foul stench of the lazaretto? Well, as I said, he was ambling, oblivious of the air around him, when suddenly on the road ahead a leper blocked his path, holding out stumps that hung with rotting flesh. I saw horror, distaste, and indignation rise to his face. Why should this object, this parody of manhood, bring its contagion to decent men? Very naturally, he mirrored my reactions. But then an extraordinary change came over him, a transformation, shift, conversion, call it what you will. Springing from his horse, he embraced with delight this hideous outcast, seized one ghastly hand, and, most revolting, pressed his lips into the white decay. You hear me? I say he kissed that man as if his hand were holy, and every sore a papal ring. It sickened me. Compassion's well enough. Pity them, toss them a coin for conscience' sake, and spur your horse. But this, why, this was senseless ostentation. I dismounted to ease my stomach. When I looked again, the youth had gone. Far up the hill, leading a cavalcade of dust, he rode like a madman back into Assisi. Mad, yes, but he cares. He cares. I live on the rim of mankind, beyond the eyes that tell men's loathing. They measure distance by the sound of my clappers, throw me food or coins, hating me, wishing disease were swift. For I am the self they despise, their cringing conscience. But he comes fearless into that round of death that rings me always like the flame of a torch. He takes me in his arms as a friend, a brother. He does not pity me. He does not speak. He cares. I know he cares. And because he cares, Christ cares, God cares.
And this is how it seemed to Francis himself. He is talking to his fellow friars years later.
And that, my sons, was the turning of my life's tide, the moment of decision pregnant beyond all others, when I knew before my reason could decide that all men in all the world are brothers. In that instant of time, the gods of youth, beauty and fastidiousness were sacrificed to a greater God, to a deeper and firmer truth. I saw in my leper an image of the suffering Christ.
That was the turning point in his life, but still its main purpose eluded him. He took to visiting lonely chapels, waiting for instructions from God. One of these was the church of San Damiano, built on the slopes of a hill among cornfields and olive trees. Here he... But let the priest tell the story.
No, signore, no one of consequence. Only the priest of a ruined chapel Assisi had forgotten. Few came here. Lizards were my parishioners. At night, fireflies my only tapers. Around us, walls had crumbled, frescoes faded, but still each year our altar stood, and above the altar, where the roofing held, a Byzantine crucifix in blue and gold. Signore, that is true. He used to come to see this crucifix, especially, I believe, those dark, round, tragic eyes, cupping, he said, the pity of the world. He'd kneel on the mildewed stones, where you are standing, forgetful of time and me, and pray before it. Lifting his face to the hanging man's, he'd plead with him to speak, and then return to praying. Later, a guest in my falling house under the ilex and the olive trees, only his lips would talk to me. His heart, I knew, stayed in the chancel. One day, a morning such as this, I came to sweep here. A hungry wind had nibbled in the night, and saw him kneeling there among fallen plaster. His face was like the man's, with eyes as wide and trance-like, motionless as his. Every now and then he spoke, always the same 4 words. What must I do, Lord? What must I do? Staring into his master's face, unmoving. Then, without warning, his body trembled. I felt it tremble. I heard him cry in a great voice, "Yes, Lord, I will, I will." Signore, believe me, that is all I heard. Yes, signore, yes. Later, he said the man had spoken, "Francis, you see my church is falling. Go and restore it." No, I repeat what Francis told me. I heard no words myself. Oh, no, I beg you, signore, not to mistake me. I do not contradict, do not deny it. There are some who live so close to God, they hear his voice, while other men, we only hear the wind and silences. What happened next? He poured his purse into my startled hands, cried oil to burn under the crucifix, and fled, God or the devil at his heels. At home, I'm told, his father being abroad, he seized a bolt of scarlet cloth, fit for the bishop or a prince's wedding, balanced it across his saddle to Foligno to sell cut price in the cloth fair, and his horse in the market. 4 hours later, he staggered into this church. His fingers were overflowing with gold pieces, panting, "Now we'll restore the church as God instructed." Knowing his father, I refused the money, but invited him to share my priest house, such as it was. He stayed a month, striding the church, building cathedrals in his mind. And then the Bernardone broke into our world, storming with servants to take him home.
Francis, warned by a friend, escaped to a cavern in the hills, lingering in darkness there, hunger and penance. Then, meekly, for Signore, he can be most arrogantly meek, he left me to seek his father. The money lay there, on that window ledge where he had tossed it. Later he returned, and as you see, transformed this church as Christ commanded. But that, of course, is another story.